There are secrets about desire that Freud revealed. Secrets society has spent a century trying to hide. These forces are so ancient and so deep that even women themselves do not fully know them. What they say they want and what truly moves them belong to different worlds. And it is in this abyss between speech and instinct that most men lose everything without even understanding what happened. Freud devoted his life to deciphering the hidden forces that govern our choices, and none of them are as enigmatic as attraction. He discovered that conscious reasons are curtains. The truth lives underneath, in the dark territory of the unconscious. A woman may swear she seeks security but feel drawn precisely to chaos. She may claim she values stability but surrender to risk. None of this is rational choice. It is hidden impulse, shaped by thousands of years of evolution. Men fail because they believe the words and ignore the signals. They confuse narratives with patterns, promises with predictability. Freud called this repression, the mechanism by which we hide even from ourselves what we truly desire. Thus, she may convince herself she wants kindness, but her body responds to strength. She may say she seeks permanence, but her behaviors reveal that novelty fascinates her more than safety ever could. This is not conscious manipulation. It is biology disguised as romance. Love is the surface, but beneath it lies the theater of instincts. For Freud, behind every gesture exists a silent pact: survival, status, reproduction. The mistake men make is believing that pure feeling exists outside these forces. It doesn't. What we call passion is, for the most part, impulse dressed up as poetry. The modern world teaches you to trust what they say, not what they do. That's why so many get lost. Freud revealed that the mind invents explanations for decisions made long before consciousness ever enters the scene. The choice has already been made in the unconscious, but the conscious mind creates stories to justify it. That's why she may believe her own words and still choose the opposite. Here is the first law Freud forces us to face. Desire does not ask permission from morality. It is selective, strategic, and often brutal. A man who trusts only in a woman's words enters a game whose rules he does not understand. She may speak of eternal love, but test your limits to see how far your strength goes. She may praise your softness while admiring another's hardness. This doesn't make her malicious. It makes her complex. The problem is that you don't see the game unfolding. The risk is not in what she is, but in what you fail to see. Biology does not respect the contracts of culture. Freud showed that attraction is born in layers so deep no reasoning can control it. You may wish love were simple, but the truth is, it is built upon irrational forces. And every man who ignores this confuses luck with merit, romance with reality, and ends up paying the price. You think you choose her, but most of the time you are chosen by her instincts. Freud showed that many decisions we consider conscious are only disguises for ancient impulses. She doesn't sit and rationally decide who to love. She feels. And often, she feels for what threatens her peace the most. That's why the woman who preaches tranquility may be consumed by the man who disrupts it. The stories we tell about love exist to make chaos tolerable. We invent narratives about equality, fidelity, and harmony to give meaning to what makes no sense. Freud knew these stories are anesthetics, not maps. Beneath them, the unconscious drives every step, indifferent to what the conscious mind believes is right. And the problem is that when instinct decides, everything else obeys. If you want to survive, you must learn to see beyond performance. Do not analyze what she declares. Observe what she chooses. Do not believe what she promises. Follow her patterns. Freud taught that the truth is never revealed in words but in repeated actions. You don't need her to confess anything. Just pay attention to where her energy flows and where her time goes. That never lies. Society trains you to interpret the wrong signals. It teaches you to trust declared intentions more than hidden tendencies. But Freud revealed that the conscious mind is a corrupted file. It stores memories, but it does not command desire. That's why men fall into the trap of believing a woman wants stability while her behavior screams for instability. It's not incoherence, it's nature. Freud discovered that desire operates like an underground system, invisible and inevitable. You may not like the rules, but you're playing regardless. A woman may believe she loves rationally, but the truth lies in the body, not the narrative. And the body obeys laws older than culture, stronger than any logical argument. Denying this changes nothing. It only makes you vulnerable. You don't need to judge. You need to understand. What moves her lies beneath consciousness, which means she too doesn't control certain choices. Freud called this the return of the repressed. What we try to hide comes back more intense, more inevitable. The more a woman denies certain desires, the stronger her attraction to whatever awakens them becomes. This isn't malice, it's instinct. This knowledge liberates you, but it demands discomfort. You must abandon the fantasy that what is said is enough to decode who she is. The unconscious does not obey morality, conventions, or coherence. Freud showed that the language of desire is nonverbal. It's in the looks, the reactions, the silences. Learning to read it is far more useful than believing any promise made in an emotional moment. And here is the truth almost no one wants to accept. What she says she wants and what actually satisfies her are separate forces. This is not lying, it is internal division. She may believe her story, but she does not command her instincts. Freud proved that this gap between consciousness and the unconscious governs everything, from small preferences to life-defining choices. Ignore this gap, and you live enslaved to devastating surprises. The problem is that most men seek comfort, not clarity. They prefer to believe the softer narrative, even when the facts scream otherwise. Freud said illusions are necessary, but dangerous. They protect the mind until they become the cause of disaster. You can cling to the beautiful version of love, but the real version will always collect its debt. That's why the first step is not to decipher what she feels, but what she does. Freud taught that the unconscious speaks through action, and those who learn this language never fall into the same traps twice. You stop being dragged by promises and start guiding yourself by patterns. And patterns are infallible because they are ancient, automatic, and relentless. The man who does not understand this lives trapped in cycles of frustration. He believes he was betrayed by bad intentions when, in reality, he was defeated by forces he never learned to see. Freud didn't write to console, he wrote to reveal. And the most uncomfortable revelation is this: you don't lose because she lies. You lose because you don't know how to see. If you want to see what's hidden, you must have the courage to abandon easy stories. What Freud discovered about women's desires does not fit into the comfortable explanations you've been taught. There are impulses, pressures, and instincts as old as the species. Denying them doesn't erase them. It only makes them invisible to you. And what's invisible becomes dangerous. Learning to see doesn't make you cold. It makes you conscious. And consciousness is power. When you understand the forces shaping desire, you realize the game was never about speeches, but about signals. Freud exposed this mechanism, and once you see it, nothing ever looks the same again. Open your eyes before it's too late. Subscribe now, and stop living blind in the game of desire. You think you know her. You believe you understand her choices, her desires, her promises. But Freud proved the human mind is a stage, and the conscious actor isn't the one directing the play. Behind the curtain sits the unconscious, pulling the strings. What governs desire is not what she thinks, but what she doesn't even know she feels. Behind every gesture lies a silent negotiation between two worlds: the conscious, which creates narratives and justifications, and the unconscious, which obeys ancient, unavoidable instincts. Freud called this psychic conflict, and it is within this clash that the contradictions of female desire are born. She says one thing, does another, believes the word while denying the impulse. This isn't incoherence, it's internal division. The unconscious asks no permission from morality. It doesn't care about promises, contracts, or ideals. It reacts, it seeks, it chooses. Freud saw that the force of desire is so intense, it can override any rational narrative. A woman may promise stability but only feel alive in the presence of risk. She may declare eternal love but secretly crave that which threatens everything she's built. The greatest trap for men is confusing language with nature. You believe what she says because you are trained to trust language. But desire doesn't speak in words. It speaks in subtle signals, in repeating patterns, in tiny cracks she cannot hide no matter how hard she tries. Freud taught that these signals are more reliable than any promise spoken in a moment of passion. The problem is that most men prefer illusion. You want to believe what she feels matches what she says. You want to imagine that what attracts is the same thing that sustains, that what she promises is what she delivers. But Freud showed this is rarely the case. The conscious mind invents stories to protect the ego. The unconscious follows its own rules, indifferent to what the mind thinks of itself. That's why so many relationships collapse silently and unexpectedly. What you call betrayal, Freud called the return of the repressed, hidden impulses resurfacing when you least expect them. The more a desire is denied, the more power it gathers. And when it finds an opening, it erupts with an intensity neither of you understands. She doesn't know why she did it, and neither do you. But this doesn't mean chaos without order. Freud didn't describe a lawless universe. He revealed patterns. Desire follows ancient logics, shaped by biology and reinforced by culture. The woman who seeks novelty will repeat that pursuit even as she swears she wants stability. The one drawn to danger will gravitate toward it, even when it terrifies her. The unconscious doesn't need consistency. It needs release, intensity, life. Repression is the silent fuel behind all this. From early on, women are taught to hide what they want to appear acceptable, proper, safe. But Freud showed that what is repressed never disappears. It only changes form. It turns into fantasy, projection, impulsive behavior. You think she's predictable because you ignore this transformation. But beneath the surface, older forces are constantly at work. And the more repressed, the more dangerous desire becomes. The woman who spends her life denying her impulses manifests them at the most unexpected times, usually when the cost is highest. Freud saw this as inevitable. Psychic energy doesn't vanish. It moves, finds detours, creates hidden pathways. The man who fails to see this lives at the mercy of emotional explosions he cannot anticipate. Projection. This was another key Freud handed us that few ever use. What someone accuses in others often reveals what they cannot accept in themselves. When she accuses you of wanting control, she may be testing her own boundaries of submission. When she claims to hate immature men, it's often because her attraction hides exactly there, in what challenges her. Moral language disguises instinct. It doesn't replace it. And this is where so many men lose themselves. You think you know her because you listen. But Freud taught that the truest voice of desire isn't spoken. It's lived. It's in the glance that lingers a second too long, the silence charged with tension, the behavior she herself cannot explain. It's not about what she thinks she wants. It's about what her body chooses, what her instincts pull toward, what the unconscious decides. The more you try to interpret female desire through pure logic, the further from truth you drift. Logic belongs to the conscious mind, but desire is a subterranean phenomenon. It overrides beliefs, plans, promises. Freud showed that instincts ask no permission, and reason usually arrives too late, just to justify what has already been decided in the depths. This is why the most strategic men study patterns, not speeches. They don't react to what she says, but to what she does. Freud called this reading the slips, moments when the truth escapes by accident, a stray comment, an automatic gesture, a sudden shift in energy. That's where the unconscious speaks. Those who learn to listen see beyond the surface, and those who see beyond the surface don't get lost. But seeing requires courage, because truth shatters comfort. You must accept that many of the stories about love, fidelity, and romance were created to protect the mind, not describe reality. Freud said illusions are like crutches. They help you walk, but they also limit how far you can go. Those who choose to drop them must learn to walk unassisted. And that is the cost of clarity. You will never see desire the same way again. You'll realize what attracts isn't what satisfies. What she declares isn't what moves her. What she promises isn't what sustains her. Not because she is false, but because she is human. The division between conscious and unconscious is inevitable, and Freud was the first to reveal how devastating that split can be for those blind to it. None of this is an invitation to cynicism. It's not about judging, it's about understanding. Desire isn't good or bad. It's powerful, and those who don't understand its mechanics become victims of it. Freud showed us the human mind wasn't designed to be transparent to itself. It was designed to survive. And survival often means lying, omitting, denying. The man who never learns to read the unconscious lives trapped in his own instincts and in those of others. He misinterprets the signals, confuses narrative with reality, trusts promises the unconscious never intended to keep. In the end, he believes he lost to malice when he actually lost to invisible forces he ignored for the sake of comfort. Freud revealed the anatomy of desire, but only you can decide whether to use it. Seeing patterns, decoding signals, and accepting the split between speech and impulse is what separates the man who chooses from the man who is chosen. The female unconscious asks no permission to act, but you can choose whether to remain deaf to it, or finally learn to hear it with brutal clarity. The greatest tragedy of modern men is not in the women they choose, but in the blindness with which they choose. Freud showed the problem isn't female desire, but male ignorance of the forces that govern it. You don't lose because women deceive you. You lose because you deceive yourself. The illusion begins early. You were taught to listen to words and ignore instincts, to trust promises and dismiss patterns, to believe logic controls desire. Freud shattered this fantasy. Desire isn't rational. It's ancient, unpredictable, deeply shaped by forces even the person doesn't understand. But you prefer the comfort of thinking everything can be explained by talks, agreements, and intentions. The reality is harsher. The unconscious doesn't negotiate, it acts. And if you can't read its signals, you lose in games you don't even know you're playing. Freud explained that much of human suffering arises from this mismatch. What consciousness wants, the unconscious sabotages. What the mind plans, instinct dismantles. This isn't failure of character, it's structure. But ignoring the structure condemns you to repeat the same mistake endlessly. That's why so many men fail in the same way. They believe their story will be different, that the woman before them is the exception, that this time will be as she promises. Freud called this repetition compulsion, the tendency to recreate the same conflicts until you finally learn to see them. But most never learn, because blaming others is easier than confronting their own role in collapse. And here's the bitter revelation. The female unconscious doesn't lie, but it doesn't explain either. She may believe the story she tells you, but her patterns tell another story. That's why the woman who values security may choose unpredictability. The one who swears loyalty may feel drawn to the forbidden. The one who asks for stability may create chaos. The speech is conscious. The desire is not. Freud saw this not as a flaw, but as a force. Female desire operates like a silent radar, constantly testing masculine solidity. She observes what you tolerate, what you allow, where you bend. She doesn't do this maliciously. She does it instinctively. Attraction doesn't bloom in the soil of weakness. If you betray your own values to keep her, the unconscious registers a simple truth. You are not who you claim to be. And when that happens, respect disappears. She may stay, she may say she loves you, but something fractures beneath the surface. Freud said libido is movement. What doesn't find intensity in attraction migrates elsewhere, to other objects, other stimuli, other scenarios. Desire needs tension, needs challenge, needs to feel it chose something it can't fully control. When you give yourself away before you're tested, you kill your own gravity. This is where many men self-destruct, trying to buy love with concessions. They offer comfort when her unconscious craves challenge, obedience when her instincts seek leadership, explanations when her desire ignores words. Freud proved the rational mind is a narrator, not a commander. What you explain doesn't matter. What you embody does. And the more you try to negotiate desire, the faster it slips away. The woman who must be convinced has already detached from instinct. You write long messages, try to prove your worth, beg for guarantees her unconscious never signed. But desire isn't born from speeches. It's born from the silent reading of who you are, when you're not performing, and that reading is ruthless. That's why Freud insisted the first mastery isn't over others, but over yourself. You cannot control what moves her, but you can control what you transmit. The man lost in his own illusions becomes easy prey for narratives that sound beautiful, but don't reflect reality. When you believe the story and ignore the pattern, you become the weakest piece on the board. But here's another truth. There is no neutrality. No choice is harmless. No relationship neutral. Freud showed every bond activates deep forces, and you pay dearly for not knowing the rules. The woman in your life can sharpen your discipline or corrode your focus. She can raise you or ruin you. And none of this depends on what she says. It depends on what her instincts respond to and what yours tolerate. The man who ignores this loses slowly, silently, inevitably. He calls predictable patterns bad luck, natural consequences betrayal, and emotional dependency love. Freud reminds us the greatest self-deception is believing your failures are always someone else's fault. The truth is more uncomfortable. You failed because you refuse to see. And this refusal creates a cycle. You repeat the same mistakes, choose the same profiles, ignore the same signs. Freud said the unconscious doesn't forget. It repeats. It repeats until you finally learn to see. It repeats until the pain of illusion becomes unbearable. It repeats until you understand the beautiful stories you were told were never the map of desire. To break the cycle, you need the courage to embrace the discomfort of truth. Freud didn't write to comfort. He wrote to reveal. And what he revealed about female desire doesn't fit the romantic narratives you were trained to believe. There is no should, no ought, no right or wrong. There are forces moving beneath the surface, indifferent to morality, and those who don't understand them lose to them. What you must understand is simple. The problem was never female desire. The problem was your illusion about it. You believed listening was enough to understand, promising was enough to be chosen, loving was enough to be loved. But Freud destroys that naive hope. Love doesn't create attraction. Promises don't create desire. Words don't create commitment. In the end, men don't fall when they are betrayed. They fall when they betray themselves, when they abandon their own values to keep someone, when they sacrifice their identity to preserve the story, when they choose not to see because truth demands they change. Freud called this self-sabotage, and it happens every time you try to mold desire to your narrative, instead of seeing desire as it is. You can keep believing the beautiful stories, or start studying the ugly patterns. You can keep betting on consciousness and ignoring the unconscious, or finally understand that the forces governing desire don't need your approval to exist. Freud didn't write for those seeking comfort. He wrote for those seeking lucidity, and lucidity hurts before it liberates. In the end, it all comes down to this. You don't control what she desires, but you control what you tolerate. You don't decide her impulses, but you decide whether to fight them blindly or learn to read them clearly. You can't change the rules, but you can stop losing for not knowing them. Desire doesn't change, but you can, and that is power. Freud's final lesson is simple. Those who don't know their own instincts, nor those of others, live ruled by invisible forces, and invisible forces have no mercy. The man who understands this doesn't become cynical. He becomes free, because he finally sees, finally chooses, finally stops being chosen by chance. The game doesn't change, you do. And that is enough to never again be manipulated by what she herself doesn't know how to confess.